Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the broadcast this evening. Once again, thank you for being here. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. It's a pleasure to see you again. And I'm anticipating a robust interaction with our guests.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Before we go into the questions for today, just to remind our guests, please do share the link with your friends, and do comment, ask questions as we go on, as usual, as you normally do. And I'm sure it's going to be an exciting time tonight. Sir, for the last 3 weeks, I think we started with the situation in Russia. And while I don't want us to sound like we're talking about the same thing, but the issue has been going on. And one of the things that has been shocking for a lot of people is yet another week where the Ukrainians have been able to withstand the challenge. What is your take, sir, on the strength of the Ukrainians in addressing the issue?
Like everybody else has said, I recognize the courage of
One quick second. Sir?
Yes.
I'm going live. Ignore what you can see on Zoom there, but I'm going to cut you to live, sir.
All right.
All right, sir. Sorry about that. And to our viewers, apologies for that break. We had to switch our line. Sir, I was talking about the response to of the Ukrainians and how they have withstood the onslaught by the Russians so far. And to say 3 weeks in now, how do you feel they're doing, sir?
Well, again, let me join you in apologizing for this technical hitch. I know nothing about IT, so I'm just as angry as maybe most of you are about what has just happened. The Ukrainians have surprised everybody. Their courage, their resilience. But then what's even more important is their willingness to make a sacrifice. I've watched interviews. I hope that they are not what we will call laryngeal interviews, that they are fake interviews. But I've watched interviews of young ladies bringing their children to Poland or Romania, handing those children over to grandpa or grandma who happen to be living there and saying, I'm going back inside to fight. Already, her husband is there fighting. Her own, at times, it could be the grandfather, an old veteran of many wars, is back inside fighting. And I've never seen this before. I've never heard of this before. Yes, it is true. We are in this age where instant interviews are transmitted, and there are social media transmitting these things. But given the fact that they know that the probability of their getting killed is really high, that willingness to go back and make a sacrifice has really astounded me. I'm quite happy at the support which they are getting from NATO countries. But I must enter a caveat here. I must enter a caveat here. I have never known a war where weapons being supplied to be used against an adversary are publicly announced on the global media. Never known it. You know, actually, the invincible battalion or division in war is the intelligence battalion, spies who go out, risk their lives to find out what the other side is doing. Well, you don't need spies anymore. Putin doesn't need spies. All he needs to do is to sit in front of one of the global media outlets, and they'll tell him what X is supplying to Y, what kind of weapons. I think that's a mistake, really. I think that's a mistake. Yes, it allows us to follow events lifetime, but we don't need it at the risk of the lives that have been lost. Journalists are out there outbidding each other, having at the back of their mind that there are Pulitzer prizes and all kinds of prizes on the global scene that may be won by whoever the journalist is, who's are judged to have, out-journalize everybody else. I think this is an unwelcome development. They don't need to tell Putin and the rest of us what weapons are being supplied to Ukraine, from where they are being supplied, what the likelihood of, Ukraine expertise to use these weapons. I really will enter a caveat that a stop should be put to that. Now, there's been a development in the past 48 hours where there have been several developments, but the one which I thought I should touch upon is there have been two drones that have flown into Croatia and into another NATO country. Their airspace have been violated by these drones. Now, nobody knows where these drones are coming from, and presumably until they are shut down and the intelligence people can then tell us from the analysis where they're coming from. Are they coming from Russia? In which case, Putin has again just turned the screw a little bit higher. He could claim, well, sending these drones into the airspace of these two NATO countries will not really constitute major intrusion. But let us see what Biden is going to say about it, because I believe that Putin had come to the conclusion that Biden and NATO will fall over backwards to avoid a war with him, especially since most analysts now believe that Putin is now bordering on irrationality. His unpredictableness is bordering on irrationality. So he may want to play on that. They think, well, I won't say they think he's mad, but they think unpredictable. So let me see how they will react. That is if those drones came from Russia. Or did the drones come from Ukraine in order to provoke NATO into actualizing Article 5? He has been banging on the need to make the air space over Ukraine safe by NATO planes giving him air cover. Is this destabilization by the intelligence unit of Ukraine? We don't know. We will soon know about it because satellites also up there will be doing their job, tracking who is firing what and from where. So I doff my hat off. I doff my hat off to the Ukrainian fighters. As I said, and I want to repeat this, it is not even it's not even their strength. It is this willingness to die for country. It's a long time since I heard or seen that kind of willingness to sacrifice.
Sir, just to pick on that NATO point you raised, sir, when Obama was president and I think it was in Syria, the war was going on there, and there was the statement, the famous red line, you must not cross the red line, you must not do this. They did, but the United States did nothing at that time. Well, maybe I should say nothing visible that we could really pick on as a response to that. If Russia indeed is crossing this red line, how far do you think he would go before NATO responds?
Let me give a clarification on the Syrian episode, because it is now being used as to go down in history as one of these classic non-act promised that was never fulfilled. My information is that the United Nations had observer teams in Syria. And when this red line was crossed, Obama sent his ambassador at the UN to go and tell the Secretary General to pull those people out of there, that he was going to bomb the bases where these planes had taken off, the planes that I think dropped chemical weapons. And the Secretary General of the United Nations refused to pull UN men out of those out of that military base. So Obama was caught in a quandary. If he hits that base, he's going to kill UN observers. And yet if he doesn't, then people will blame him for not fulfilling his promise. But the explanation I'm giving is not going to go worldwide, even though it is available out there. And so Obama, for the rest of his life, will carry that his own cross of a president who threatened and never fulfilled that threat. How far now will Putin go? I think that was then your question. He's done all the things that we think, one, he wouldn't do, two, he shouldn't do. Yes, our attention has been brought to his own peculiar style of warfare, which are demonstrated in Chechnya, demonstrated in Syria, there's another place where it's demonstrated it, which is actually bulldozing, leveling, flattening out urban centers in order to terrorize people into submission. This is an act of war that is illegal. International law, international criminal law does not permit that. If the act was done deliberately with the intention of actually targeting civilians. Please don't misunderstand me. Civilians get killed in war as, a collateral damage, an unfortunate term that has gone into military lexicon now by Colin Powell. Collateral damage, not intended. They just happen to be in the way. International law permits that. But when the objective is to hit the civilians and terrorize them, then it becomes a criminal act. I don't think Putin really cares about that. I don't think he will ever end up before the ICC. Even if he gets overthrown by the Russians for several reasons, they won't hand him over to be tried before the ICC, just as the United States will not hand over any of his presidents or any of his generals to appear before the ICC. I think that what we should be concentrating on now is how to bring this war to an end. There's been enough suffering. We've applauded the courage of the Ukrainians, their resilience. We applaud it. Their president remaining in the capital that is being shelled. I don't think in all my own 60 years as a scholar of diplomacy, I've heard of a head of state stay in his capital and yet enemy soldiers have started to shell, and he knows that when they enter, he's going to be target number one, and yet he has stayed there. Incredible. Circumstances often throw up the character in a man that we don't know he ever had. But now is the time for us to think of how to bring this war to an end. At the risk of repeating myself, even though I have now added a few items to it, you'll recall before even this war started, you asked me, is there any way to prevent the war? And at that time, I gave certain parameters, which I will repeat. And one of them publicly has been embraced by the president of Ukraine, that he will forfeit his right to join NATO. Russia must then also be made to give a commitment. Although I was listening to a former Ukrainian president that said, what are commitments worth when you don't fulfill your obligation under the commitments. He was referring to commitments given to Ukraine when she gave up her nuclear weapons. The security umbrella that they said they will provide over Ukraine. They gave up the nuclear weapons and no umbrella when the rain came. But Russia must be made to giving a commitment guaranteed now by NATO that it will withdraw the troops back to where they were before this trouble started. That's two. Number three, a federal system of governance in Ukraine itself that allows the two republics that had broken away to be brought back under the same Republic of Ukraine. There must be a federal system that allows for devolution and autonomy for them. Number four, and this may come to you as a surprise, I believe Ukraine should let Crimea go, recognize Russian sovereignty over Crimea. I've said it on this program before that actually Crimea was given to Ukraine by Nikita Khrushchev, who became the head of the Soviet Union after Stalin died. And he happened to have come from Ukraine himself. Although we should also forget that Stalin also transferred Russians into these two republics that are now trying to break away. So there was a movement of transferring people under this, universalization of socialism, I will call it, loyalty of among comrades that allowed and justified transferring of all these people. But now let's draw the line somewhere. Let Ukraine recognize Crimea and let Russia, take it away. Then, but above all, once there is a seriousness to negotiate, I don't believe the negotiation going on is that serious. But once there is this seriousness to negotiate, probably midwifed by maybe Israel and Turkey, there should be a ceasefire. There should be a ceasefire. Once both sides agree to these two mediators and are prepared to negotiate in good faith, there must be a ceasefire. And finally, and this is where the United Nations then gets involved, United Nations peacekeeping forces must be put between the boundary of Ukraine and Russia to guarantee the peace there, even if they are going to be there for the next 20 years, so that there will be no stray bullets, no agents provocateurs, trying to incite a war between the two people, because there are going to be lots of them who will not be happy that it's a negotiated settlement. So to me, these are the parameters that a peace deal can be worked upon immediately. The long-term peace deal about who pays for what damages, who helps in the reconstruction of Ukraine, at what point do the sanctions, the Western sanctions on Russia, at what point do you remove them? Those to me will be the long-term goals to be set for a peace conference?
Thank you for that, sir. This week, we saw the president of Ukraine address US Congress. And he's reiterated some of the demands and the help that he needs. Now, the United States has gone a long way in donating cash, equipment to the Ukrainians to help them in this battle. At what point should President Zelensky be getting the message that, one, that no-fly zone is not going to happen? And from the side of the United States, when does this become an active war by proxy? Because they're effectively now funding the war to a great extent with the vast sums of money that they are putting into Ukraine. What is your take on that issue going on there, sir?
This is one of the consequences of COVID-19 diplomacy. Addressing Parliament by Zoom. He's done it with the European Union Parliament, he's done it with the British Parliament, he's done it with the American Congress, he's done it with the German Bundestag, German Parliament, and I'm sure we haven't had the last of it. He gives him a global, the president of Ukraine, he's got a global, he used to be an actor. And I'm not saying this in a demeaning manner, but now the whole world is his stage. And he's the main actor. And there are several other by-actors, who are playing different roles. I think it's obvious to him that it's not going to get the no-fly zone. It's not. But he must keep repeating it. It's a mantra now. Number one item on his list of demands must always be that, even though he knows he's not going to get it. But he wants it to continue to resonate. When history of this whole catastrophe is written, you will find not just one sentence, you may even find a chapter on the politics of the no-fly zone. Who asked for what, who said what justifications are given, how do these justifications weigh up or are just, excuses for the ultimate thing, which is we don't want a conflict, we don't want a direct conflict with Russia, which may escalate into a nuclear war. Because once you start shooting down each other's planes, at what point do you tell those pilots who may be carrying missiles with nuclear warheads not to take off? At what point? All it takes is for one to not make a mistake, but try to see whether he will get away with it. The weapons that are being supplied that have dealt with that, they have dealt with the modality, which I think is wrong. But, this is already I've got to grant you that this is already a war between NATO and Russia, or it is already a war between NATO and Russia, because the weapons are coming from NATO countries, and to fight for Ukraine to fight the Russians. And the weapons are coming from Russia against Ukraine, but also statements have been made in this past week by Putin himself that he will regard people supplying weapons to Ukraine as enemies of Russia. He has also said that he regarded sanctions against Russia as an act of war. So you are right in drawing one's attention to the fact that actually we've moved from Cold War between Russia and NATO to, well, lukewarm war between Russia and NATO. What we are all praying against is hot war between NATO and Russia. But to say that there is no war going on between NATO and Russia is misleading. There is. There is. And no attempt being made to hide it.
One question I want to ask, sir, when we start to look at how the EU has been responding to this, we saw the prime ministers of Poland, Slovenia, and Czech Republic take a train to go to Ukraine to show solidarity with the Ukrainians. Was that risky? And secondly, was that enough to make the Ukrainians feel that the EU was really behind them in this war?
Well, I have tried to wrap that particular diplomatic act around my brain. Just risky, definitely. It was reckless. If that train had been bombed and those officers of state had been killed, then what would their countries have done? I don't know. I don't have any answer. Probably they will list it as another war crime. But having made it, when you compare the risk taken with what was achieved, I don't think the risk was worth it, frankly, to the three gentlemen involved, and it doesn't add anything. It doesn't add anything to the kind of support that Ukraine needed. They didn't come with their troops. They didn't, I don't know, because now I need to be careful not to contradict myself. I don't know whether on those trains were weapons that we are not being told. And if there were weapons, I'm glad we are not being told. That shows maturity of diplomacy that has been absent in this conflict. But I don't think it's something that I know they were not heads of state. Their heads of state are their presidents. Prime ministers are heads of government. Nevertheless, they are that high up in the hierarchy of governance that I don't think they should have taken the risk. They shouldn't have.
So let's go to Africa and look at one particular issue there, and that is Senegal, where, again, similar terminology is being used in Senegal. And this is where the government has said that they have begun a military offensive against a separatist group in the southern part of the country. What is your take on what is going on in Senegal, sir? And is it a situation we can draw parallels from with what's going in Ukraine in terms of the timing of the particular activity that's happening in Senegal?
I think you are referring to the rebellion that has been going on in the Casamance province. And this has been going on, I don't know, since the time of independence of Senegal. The parallel I would like to draw and the warning I would like to make is the parallel with the Tigray rebellion in Ethiopia. Because again, on this program, and I suppose there were other scholars on other programs, were warning the Tigray people that there's no way you will take on militarily a central government and the price you will pay. First, you won't win. But by the time that war is over, again, your civilians will have suffered heavily. That's the attention of the Casamance people, leaders, that I would like to point to. You cannot take on the Senegalese army. I mean, short of, I'm not even sure that in this stage that the global order is in, that we are going to get a superpower from the global north who will come to support the Casamance rebellion. They may give them enough weapons to just bleed them, but they will not give them enough weapons to be able to fight off the Senegalese army. So then what is the point? What's the point? You have grievances. These grievances have been brooding for, I don't know, 50 years. Maybe again before it becomes a full-blooded war, the AU should perhaps call on, 2 or 3 wise leaders. Mbeki is there. Mbeki is there. There is a retired or a former president of Ghana is there. That you can empower and engage to immediately get involved, and not when the whole issue becomes a question of airplanes bombing people, bombing centers, bombing hospitals, bombing bridges, and what have you. But to me, and I must, during the debate, the Security Council of the UN on the Russian-Ukrainian war, I felt so proud listening to the Kenyan ambassador go through the history of African attitude towards borders at independence. That, yes, all our borders in Africa are artificial. Frankly, when I teach my students, I often tell them that apart from maybe Australia, which is an island nation, surrounded all by water, and perhaps Madagascar, all boundaries in the world are artificial. They are as a result either of war or of negotiation. The boundary between America and Canada is artificial. The boundary between the United States and Mexico is as a result of wars, artificial. In the United Kingdom, because yes, that is an island, but then it's an island adjoining another island, Ireland. And you know as well as I do, the wars that have gone on between Northern Ireland, those who want to join the Irish Republic, and those who want to remain part of the United Kingdom. The boundary between France, all of these boundaries as a result of wars. So there's really nothing unique about saying African boundaries are artificial. Or 99% of boundaries in the world are artificial. So why would one group now want to visit on the head of the people it claims is fighting for horrors and bloodshed and starvation and all the things that go with war in the world these days? So let the EU quickly again get to know some wise leaders to go there and talk sense into the head of the Casamance people before the war becomes a hot war.
Yes, someone was asking a question, sir, which I think you have already answered. And they said, can the Senegalese army suppress the self-determination of the Casamance region? I think you have already answered that question. Thank you for submitting that question. Sir, let's go to another tricky situation. And this is the one between Iran, Iraq, United States. And this is following an attack from Iran on Iraq, but very close to American interests. And the United States has said, well, the attack was not targeted at us. It was probably targeted at Israeli interests in that area. What is your view on that? And to what degree would this situation affect the current talks around the nuclear agreement that they're just about to finalize?
Well, you will recall that the main objection that Trump had to the nuclear agreement #1 was that it was limited to Iran committing itself not to be a nuclear power. That it did not ask Iran not to behave itself as a regional power. And the Iranians said, well, that was not the objective of Iranian agreement #1. I would love to know how that tricky issue has been dealt with in the ongoing in the ongoing negotiation for nuclear agreement number 2. The Ukrainian-Russian war, we are back there again, has strengthened to some extent the hands of Iran in this matter, because with the sanctions against Russia, Russian oil and Russian gas, Europe needs an alternative source of gas, an alternative source of oil, and getting Iran to turn on the tap that the Americans' sanctions have forced them to turn off is going to be one of the objectives that is now going to affect the negotiation. If right now it will be winks and nods about, we have no objection to your turning on your oil and gas pipeline and resuming the supply of oil into the world system. And of course, the Iranians are going to be saying, well, you've got to remove the sanctions that you put against us. You cannot just cherry pick which of the sanctions you will informally look the other way. And so depending on the desperation of the West to us access to oil and gas, you can find in the next few weeks, you are going to start seeing indications of who is giving what. But let us look at what had happened in the past 24 hours. The release of those two English Iranian citizens who had been locked up in Iran for 5-6 years. I think 5 years in the case of the man, 6 years in the case of the woman. And we all know why Iran refused to release them. It's because England was holding on to Iranian money. I could never understand the attitude of the British government. But then when it comes to money, well, I've never been able to understand while others will simply pay the debt. Iran had paid for tanks. You delivered some of the tanks, and then there was a change of government in Iran, a revolution. You refuse to supply them the rest of the tanks, and they say, okay, refund our money to us. Britain said, no, we are not refunding the money to you. Anyway, last week, that money was refunded, and Iran released these two people. Now, Britain, the British government and British spokesmen have been going through contortions. We actually didn't give the money to Iran, we gave the money to a third party under conditions that, excuse me, the Iranians are no fools. If they knew they wouldn't get their hands on that money, they wouldn't release those people. But that's an indication that what is happening in Ukraine is actually changing the balance of power in the negotiation with Iran.
One last question before we round up tonight. Someone is raising this question on YouTube here. I think it's this one, but I'm going to paraphrase to the person that asked the question. I will paraphrase the question. I don't want to name names there, but I think you do raise an important point. And sir, the question is this. We're starting to see some riots in the UK in support of some of the oligarchs, and security forces are responding with force. And the way I think I want to frame that question is this, sir. What kind of a challenge is it going to create for Western governments if citizens start to protest in support of the people from Russia, the Russian oligarchs that have been sanctioned? What kind of challenge is that going to create?
This is news to me. I didn't know this was going on. And it comes to me, even though I don't know the details, it comes to me as a shock that there will be people who will be demonstrating in favor of the oligarchs. It comes as a surprise to me. But then maybe it shouldn't. Maybe it shouldn't. You will recall when a former British Prime Minister, Cameron, said to Her Majesty the Queen that Nigeria was a corrupt country. And a journalist then asked President Buhari, who was in London for a conference at that time, but they were expecting him to walk out and board his plane and fly back to Nigeria. His reply was, just give me back the money stolen in Nigeria that you are holding in your country. The law is very clear, actually. It's just that, well, when it comes to matters involving the global south, the interpretation gets twisted. If you say the man who stole and the man who receives the stolen goods are both guilty of a crime. But so Britain is actually guilty of a crime of receiving stolen goods, because you know this money are stolen and brought to your country, and you received it because it helps to maintain low interest rate, to have money to then give to your citizens at low interest rates, so you can build houses and build properties by that. So maybe these are people who are beneficiaries, whether in the real estate sector, football fans, people who are working in the social service sector and who are benefiting from the influx of property and money by the oligarchs, who now see that the steps being taken by Britain without any sort of compensation for their own loss of employment is going to affect their interest. Maybe that is why you have this. But I don't believe that is going to have a lot of groundswell support from the British people.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry, before I leave that matter, there's another issue. I think the government of Britain is a mean government, not the British people. I don't think the British people needed that doling out of 350 pounds or something to welcome Ukrainians into their homes. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I think genuinely British people will have welcomed these people. Why it needs to be sweetened by dashing them money? I think the British government has done great disservice to the British people.
Yeah. I'm going to put this last one to you, sir, because someone is challenging your comment regarding the Casamance region and Dakar, that you said they cannot withstand the might of Dakar. And the person is saying here but that battle has been going on for a long time, and the government has not been able to get that under control. Therefore, maybe the government is not quite as strong as we think the government is. Do you want to respond to that before we close, sir? And the person,
I think is the Senegalese government who now says that they are going to turn on the full power of the military force against the Casamance people. It's not me. And if the government says that, it means probably that they're handling them with kid glove all along. I mean, I can speak with some authority on the Nigerian Civil War, which started as a police action because General Gawan said, we are brothers. This is not going to be a war. It was much later on that he then decided that actually this is going to be a major war and nothing will be held back. So, as I said, I have no dog in this fight. I just pray and hope that no bloodshed, no starvation, no raping of women will be visited on the Casamance people. If it's been going on, and he is right, whoever that question, yes, it has been going on, but as a low-level insurrection that has not brought down the weight of airplanes and tanks and artillery shells destroying towns and villages. It never got to that stage. But if it's going to get to that stage, that's why I'm just warning that it's not necessary. It's a war that Casamance cannot win.
Thank you very much, sir. I know I took you over time this evening. I'll try to keep to that time next week. But thank you for being there, sir. And thank you to our viewers. I can see quite a few of you there. Thank you for the comments as well. I hope I did justice to some of the questions that I rephrased for not wanting to mention names there. But sir, thank you very much, sir. See you again next week. And to our viewers, good night. See you next week.